I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, welcome to Core Purpose, your force multiplier. And just a little housekeeping before we take off. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So I'm looking at chat. If for some reason you cannot hear me, let me know. Hopefully you can see me. This is as much for me as maybe it is for you. Just to remind me to turn my video on. And hopefully you can see my slides. So there should be a slide that says housekeeping checklist. So if for some reason you can't, drop that in the chat. And if you can, we're all good. So again, my name is Mark Fenner. I'm a scaling up coach and strategist, and I founded a company called Rise Performance Group back in 2011. And again, I'm excited to have you here today. We'll be working together for the next 30 to 45 minutes as we make our way through this program, Core Purpose, your force multiplier. So let me start with my purpose. And you can see it here on the screen, and I'm going to take you through it. So it says this, it says to inspire influential leaders. And so let me talk about influence. Influence to me is a leadership. I want to work with leaders that understand that leadership is not about title, position, or power. Leadership is about influence. So it's about inspiring people to want to follow them to a better place. And so I want to inspire these influential leaders to build cohesive teams. So cohesive teams have high trust, they have commitment, and they generate superior results. And they want to use these teams to scale purpose-driven companies. So purpose-driven means that they stand for something more than just making money. And we're going to talk about core purpose. So that's really right at the bullseye of what we're going to talk about today. To bend the curve in their respective communities. And I was inspired by this concept. You'll see to the right a paper that I downloaded from the Kauffman Foundation. Being from Kansas City, Ewing Kauffman was just a legend in Kansas City. He owned the Royals until he passed away. And then his legacy is the Kauffman Foundation, whose mission is to really work with entrepreneurs to help them start and grow businesses. But they talked about this idea of the importance of having companies that matter in a community. And companies that matter bend the curve. They make a difference in their communities in terms of, number one, the wealth that's created. They tend to employ a lot of people. So a lot of people are getting money that they can spend. They also bring in other vendors, other suppliers, and that brings wealth into the community. They also bring leadership into the community. Companies that scale up develop leaders. And so you develop great people that know how to inspire and honor and take care of others and be good corporate and good community citizens. And then third, they tend to give back. They give back of their time. You know, a lot of companies have initiatives now where they dedicate certain number of hours that their employees volunteer, but then also their employees, just because they've become more, so they've achieved more, now they can give more. And that might be through church, through ball leagues, through other nonprofit organizations. And so that's really my purpose, is to help influential leaders, you know, build these cohesive teams so that they can scale purpose-driven companies to literally bend the curve in the communities that they're involved in. And this quote from Tony Robbins has really been foundational to me for probably the last 20 to 25 years, whenever it was I first heard it. But I love this quote, and it says this. It says, you know, it's not a lack of resources that tends to hold us back. Rather, it's a lack of resourcefulness. In other words, it's not what's not there. It's not the challenges. It's, do we have the resourcefulness inside us to overcome those challenges to make our goals happen? And this quote has really helped me. And the idea of resourcefulness comes from our core purpose. So if our why is big enough, if our reasons for achieving something are big enough, we'll find a way. You know, we get the things that we must accomplish when something becomes that important. And so I think using your core purpose and the core purpose of your team can help to tap into that extra level of inspiration to help you and your team overcome challenges as you're scaling your team and scaling your organization. And I think a great example of this was back in 2018. Many of you will remember there was a group of baseball players in Thailand, and they decided for some crazy reason to go into this cave. And then some rains came, they got lost in the cave, and then rains came and it sealed off the way they got in there. And so they were trapped in the cave. And you know, they were found, thank goodness. And then the speculation was, how do we get them out? And many of you will remember that that there was debate on whether to have them live in this cave for 3 months until the rain subsided, and then they could walk back out. They looked at maybe drilling a hole in from above into the cave to get them out. And the other option was to try to dive them out and teach them to scuba dive and get them to go through just a torrential passes in pitch black environment to get them out of the cave. And it took about a week to make the decision, but they finally decided that they would dive them out. They'd go in with specially trained Navy SEAL divers, and they'd bring them out. And of course, the whole country was on edge. And I remember this was a Sunday morning, and I got up Sunday morning. I couldn't wait to get to the paper and read about it. And in the paper was this picture, and it was this quote from the commander, the Navy SEAL commander in the Thai Army. And here's what he said. He said, "Today is D-Day for our operation." He said, "I confirm that we have been at war with water in time from the first day up until today." He said, "Finding the boys does not mean we finished our mission. It's only a small battle we have won, but the war has not ended. The war ends when we win all 3 battles: the battle to find, the battle to rescue, and the battle to send them home." See, if you're a part of the SEAL program, your fundamental purpose is to save lives. And you put your life at risk if that's what it takes to save those lives. And you might remember that one of the SEALs tragically died during the rescue operation, trying to get to the boys. And then another one died sometime later as a result of injuries that he suffered as part of the rescue attempt. But ultimately, they got all 13 of those boys, I think it was 13, all of them and their coach safely out of the cave, safely returned to their families. So again, I go back to that quote. Is it a lack of resources, or is it a lack of resourcefulness? And I believe that this commander was looking to tap the resourcefulness of his team on that last day and remind them of what their core purpose was. So let me take a minute and just define core purpose for you. And I borrowed this from Jim Collins, so you can look it up. But core purpose is the organization's reason for being. An effective purpose reflects people's idealistic motivations. Idealistic, meaning it's more than just making money. It's more than just, earning a paycheck or helping you or helping the team become wealthy or achieve goals. It's an idealistic motivation for doing the company's work. It doesn't just describe the organization's output or target customers. It captures the soul of the organization. And I believe that's what that Thai commander was doing. He was tapping into the soul of the organization. Now, I got inspired on this topic, back about the time I found the article from Kauffman Foundation. It was 2013 or 2014. And I met this guy, Nick Vojakovic. And Nick has a unique story. He was actually born with no arms and no legs. And this is a picture of Nick speaking right here. And Nick struggled as a young man with what's my purpose, and attempted suicide as a young teenager, and eventually found his way. And every day in high school, he would talk to the janitor that would wait for his car to come pick him up. Obviously, he didn't go jump on a school bus to get home. And he talked to him in his wheelchair and then help him get in the car so that he could get home. And one day the janitor said, Nick, he said, you've got such a deep faith, and despite your challenges, you're really optimistic and inspiring. He said, why don't you consider speaking? to other people that could benefit from your message. And so Nick went out and took his advice, and he started speaking, and he told me this story that about 2 years into his speaking, he was at a high school and there was about 300 students. And he said, I was kind of starting to find my stride, and the team was really emotionally engaged. And at the end of my talk, this girl came up and she said, do you mind if I hug you? And Nick said, well, of course, feel free. And so she bent down and hugged him. And as she hugged him, she whispered in her ear and said, in Nick's ear, and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. Nobody has ever told me that I am loved and that I am beautiful just the way I am. And Nick said when he heard those words, his heart just melted. And he said, this is my purpose. I know there's other people out there that need to hear this message. And I believe I'm the one that's uniquely equipped to deliver it in a way that connects. And so today, Nick travels all over the world. He speaks over 200 times a year, which is a lot. I think that's 4 or 5 times a week. And he gets brought into communities, even countries, and he literally bends the needle on suicide rates as a result of the impact of his statement, of his speeches. And so I met him at a John Maxwell speaking event. That's where the picture came from. And in that event, he told us that his goal was to impact 7 billion people. So think about that, 7 billion. That's essentially the whole world. And when he said that, the guy next to me leaned over and he goes, well, easy for him to say. He's got no arms and no legs. And I thought, that's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is if you have a strong enough sense of purpose, you can overcome any handicap. So again, is it a lack of resources or is it a lack of resourcefulness? Let me take you back to Steve Jobs. Everybody's heard of Apple. Everybody knows they're hugely successful. But Steve started Apple back in the early 70s, and then he got fired. They brought a new CEO and leadership team in the mid 80s, and Apple just slid. And in the mid to late 90s, Apple was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. And so the board of directors convinced Steve Jobs to come back, and he took the assignment. And one of his first meetings, he met with his marketing team and product teams, and they had all their products spread out on the table, and they were trying to figure out, how do we sell this stuff? We need to start generating revenue. They're like, Steve, you're the marketing guru. How do we sell this stuff? We're in operating systems. We got printers. I mean, this one's fast. This one does this. And they were talking about all the features and benefits. And after a little while of listening to it, Steve said, hold on. And he walked up to the front of the room and he looked at the team. He said, look, Apple's not about what computers can do. Apple's about what creative people can do with computers. Apple's about serving people who think outside the box. Apple's about serving people who want to use computers to change the world. And it just completely reframed that meeting. And they started looking at all their products and services through the lens of, okay, what do we have that's so special that's going to equip somebody that's fanatical about our products and services to go out and do something special, ultimately maybe change the world. And those of you might remember the story. This is what really spawned the Think Different campaign, a very, very famous campaign today. It honored the crazy ones. If you want to go back and Google the crazy ones, you can get an insight into that campaign. And the campaign had pictures of black and white pictures of all these thought leaders that had changed the world. So think Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mike Tyson. I mean, people from all different walks of life that had done things that were so extraordinary that they changed the world. And a couple years ago, I was at church, and this guy came in and he sat next to me, and he was saying that something came up that he worked for Apple back in the late 70s and early 80s. And so this would have been on Steve Jobs' first stint at Apple. And I said, I've always been fascinated with the Apple story. So what was it like working for Jobs back then? He goes, Mark, I would go back to those days in a heartbeat. He goes, that was undoubtedly the best time of my career. And I said, well, so what was it? I mean, how did he create this environment that you all were so passionate? And this guy was working in a production facility here in Dallas, making the MacBook IIs, the original Apple IIs, the Apple IIs when they first came out. And he said, Mark, he said, we never once thought that we were just making computers. He goes, we knew we were changing the world. And he said it with such conviction. And just imagine if you could have somebody in 30 years from now, 30 or 40 years from now, talking about this time, 2020 to 2025, and saying, man, I just remember those years. I remember we had that crazy coronavirus, but I'd go back to those days in a heartbeat. We came out of that virus and we just had such passion and energy for the work that we were doing. I mean, I couldn't wait to get up out of bed every day and go work for that organization. And of course, you all have seen what's happened to Apple since then. And by the way, when Steve Jobs made that comment, they went back to 2 laptops and 2 desktops, got rid of everything else that didn't center through the bullseye of serving the crazy ones, as they called these people that thought they could change the world, with products that they thought were so uniquely special that they empowered them to do the work they wanted to do. Let me take you to one final story, and then we'll talk about your purpose. I want to talk about one of my clients that I recently worked with. And the company is called Sidekick Operators. They're a private equity firm. And these guys are founded by a guy named Phil Miner. And Phil scaled up a company called Miner Corporation to 1,700 employees, 500 million in sales, and exited. And now he wants to go work with other business owners and entrepreneurs to help them do the same. And so we were talking about this idea of purpose. And you think of a private equity firm, and we were coming up with some, I think, pretty good ideas. You know, it's like, we're going to help entrepreneurs leave a legacy. And, that's a pretty good purpose. That's noble. I mean, they want to leave stuff to their kids, or maybe they want to start a foundation, or maybe they want to do something like Ewing Kauffman did. And can they bring their resources to bring the structure so the organization lasts for multiple generations? And then we kind of went to helping family-owned businesses make an impact on their community, that sense of community, that bend in the curve, the things that I talked about that Phil is passionate about. And then we talked about building world-class service organizations. And all of these were interesting. But then there was a complete lift in the energy level of the room when we talked about honoring the service professional. And something came up, and I said, Phil, tell me about this honoring the service professional. And man, he just got on a roll. And he said, the way I was successful building Miner Corporate is that we turned the organizational structure upside down. We put our service professionals at the top. And we're not going to call them service executives. We're not going to call them maintenance people. These people are service professionals. And I love them. I love their families. And they just got on a roll. He said, Mark, I think if we can make a big enough impact, we can actually work with schools and change the curriculum to inspire kids to get back into the trades. And he was just going on and on and on. And I said, Phil, that's your purpose. That's your sense of purpose. It's building, it's honoring these service professionals, partnering with people who get it, and developing great organizations that allow these individuals to flourish. And as we talked more and we went through our strategic planning session, towards the end, he said, Mark, as I think more about this honoring the service professional, the biggest challenge to scaling a service-oriented business is attracting people. And most executives don't get how to inspire these people and how to get them engaged in the work and fired up about the work the company's doing. That's our secret sauce. And he said, you know what? I think that's the constraint in the industry. And if we can do that better than anybody else, we will be a magnet for the best talent out there, and we'll never have a problem scaling the organizations that we work with. So again, I challenge you to think, what is our purpose? What gets me excited to get up in the morning? What could get me excited to get up in the morning? What could get my team excited to get up in the morning? So let's walk through some examples. But before, I want to point you to this book, Firms of Endearment. And if you look to the left, you'll see the chart, and you'll see that in the middle are the FOE firms. That's the Firms of Endearment firms that are highlighted in this book. And these are companies that have put purpose first. They put purpose at the center of their organization. But what the chart's showing is their cumulative market performance, the money they make, the revenues they grow. And you can see how much they outperform the S&P 500. And you can also see how much they outperform the good to great companies, which is a pretty good group of companies to benchmark yourself with. So I highly encourage you to pick up this book. Raj Sisodia speaks at our Scaling Up Summits quite a bit. He was on one of our summits that we had, our virtual summits that we had earlier this year. And he partnered to write the book, Conscious Capitalism. So he's the thought leader behind the Conscious Capitalism movement. And that might be something that you Google as well. But these are companies that do good by doing good, right? They've got strong senses of purpose to their people, to their community, to the society as a whole. And profitability and revenue growth comes as a result of being focused on serving others through that strong purpose. So let me give you some ways to find your core purpose. And I'm going to talk through each of these. I'm going to give you an overview, and then I'll go back and break them down a little bit. And if you look to the right, you'll see I've got a clip of a document called Building Your Company's Vision. And this was written by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. And it's a summary of their book, Built to Last. But it's available. You can Google it, and you can download this. It's available on Harvard Business Review. And they'll let you download the first couple for free. So if you want to go grab this document, I highly recommend it. But here are some approaches for you to think about. One is the 5 whys. I'll walk you through that in a minute. The second one is fun. It's the random corporate serial killer game. So I'll walk you through that in a minute. 2, what deeper sense of purpose would motivate you and your team to continue to dedicate your precious creative energies to the company, even if you won the lottery? So if there was no reason for you to work, what kind of work would bring you in so that you'd want to volunteer to help that company succeed? Or what kind of purpose would that company need to have to make you want to volunteer to help that company succeed? And then the last one is why was the organization founded? So let's take a look at each of these. So the 5 whys. The 5 whys. So you might think about your department, your company, the work you do, and you might start with, what do I do? So just the simple question, what do I do? And then the first why is, why does that work matter? You know, why does that work matter? And when you get the answer to that, then you might put, why is that important? In fact, let me give you an example. I was working with a payroll processing company. And they outsource the whole payroll processing. So they've got all the functions. They run it all in-house for the clients, and they work in the middle to upper market. And I did this exercise with the CEO and the CEO's leadership team. And I said, so what do you do? Well, we provide payroll outsourcing services. And I said, so why does that work matter? And they said, well, companies have got to pay their employees. And I said, so why is that important? And they said, well, if the employees aren't paid, Mark, are you really asking me this question? Then they're not going to come back to work. And I said, just work with me on this for a minute. And I said, okay, so why does that matter? And then they started thinking, and they said, well, the truth is that if people are worried about whether or not they're going to get paid, or if their paychecks have errors, or if they're afraid they're going to have errors, they're never going to be able to fully commit to the company's mission. And I said, so why is that important? And they said, well, the leadership team needs to have complete confidence that we're going to execute on our promise to them, so they can convey that to their people, so that they can focus all their energies towards helping that company succeed. And I knew we were getting close. And I said, so Brian, why does that matter? Let's go one more level. Why does that matter? And he said, well, because there's no way, it's hard enough to keep everybody focused and reaching their full potential, but any distraction becomes a drag or becomes friction against their ability to reach their true potential. So if they're going to really reach their true potential, they need to have 100% confidence that we're going to deliver on the promises that we made, so they don't even have to worry about it. They've got so much confidence they can just put it out of their mind. And I'm like, bingo, I think that's it. So their whole sense of purpose became about helping companies reach their true potential by services so good they never even have to worry about it. And that stuck. And that became a foundational. And I'll tell you, when we did this exercise, they were around 200 employees. Today, they're over 700 employees. They've gone over 150 million in annual revenues. They're one of those companies that matters. They got hundreds of people working for their company. They're making a huge impact on their clients, a huge impact in the community, because they rallied around this sense of purpose. So let's go back to you. So what do you do? And why does that work matter? You know, why does it matter? Write down what comes to your mind. And then, why is that important? You know, why is that important? And then take that answer and let me ask you, why does that matter? Why does that matter? And then, why is that important? And then, why does that matter? Usually, around the fifth why, you really start to get to that essence of your core purpose. Now, sometimes my clients, they make that leap to, you know, we're going to change the world. And, you know, that was Steve Jobs' purpose. We're going to change the world. We're going to provide a bicycle for the mind that's going to give people access to information they've never had. It's going to change the world. And you know what? Steve Jobs believed it, and he believed it right here. He believed it in his gut, and he can communicate it in a way that a guy sits down next to me at church 40 years later and says, I'd love to go back into that environment. We had so much passion and so much energy. But not everybody can sell that change the world concept. So sometimes I encourage my clients to get close to that and then come back. Like Phil's about bending the curve in these communities through honoring these service professionals and looking at all the things that he can do, from schools to helping families, to helping, you know, people that are set up to excel in the trades. And he's just got a ton of story and a ton of passion around the impact that can make. I don't think he's saying we're going to change the world. But you may say, what I'm doing is going to change the world. And you can sell it and you can get people engaged in it. So I don't want to ratchet you down, but I also want you to be cautious. So sometimes I say, let's get all the way to change the world and then come back one why. And let's see if that's something that we can really rally the group around. But this is very personal. As a leader, it's what can you sell? And can you sell it and make it real and live it and get everybody on board with it? Remember, influencing. Remember I started out earlier, I said I want to deal with influential leaders. They realize that leadership isn't about a position, it's not about power, it's not about a title, it's about influence. So if I want people to follow me, I've got to get them to buy into something bigger than themselves, similar to how those Navy SEALs bought into our job is to save lives, to put our life at risk to save the lives of others. And that's why they trained, that's why they were prepared, quite frankly, to do that death-defying dive, because they had trained and trained and trained, because that was their sense of purpose. So this can be a powerful, powerful exercise for you to do with yourself, for you to do with your team. I really like doing it with the team because you get the team dynamic and you get energy and you get people feeding off each other. When I worked with Phil at Sidekick Operators, it was him and two of the key people of his leadership team. And we just got energy going. And it was through that energy that the ideas came out. When I worked with Brian, it was him and 4 members of his leadership team at the payroll processing company. And that's where those ideas come out and bubble up. So maybe this gets it for you, but maybe it doesn't. So let me give you another exercise that we can use. This is called the random corporate serial killer game. And the idea here is that somebody comes in and buys your company, or buys you out of your position. They give you more money than you need, and they assure you all your employees, everybody you work for is going to be fine. The only difference is they're going to be repurposed to do something different than what they're doing today. So the mission or the purpose of the organization as it exists today will no longer exist. So the fundamental question is, what indelible hole would be left in the greater good of your communities, of society, if you or your company failed to exist? So think, if what you do, the work you do, is just wiped off, what indelible hole would be left? And this is a fun game to play. Put people in small groups, let them brainstorm and come up with ideas, because the creativity of the crowd can sometimes really land on something that really connects. See, the challenge with purpose is about emotion. It's about energy. It's not intellectual at all. And when we try to make it intellectual, it just falls flat. And so we're really looking for the energy. When I was working with Phil and his energy level went up 3 or 4 octaves, I'm like, that's it. That's it, Phil. I hear the energy in your voice. How do we frame that? And do you agree? Do you feel the energy? And he's like, you know what, I do. Where'd that come from? It came out of just brainstorming, of talking. We've been talking as human beings for thousands of years, writing a lot less, spreadsheets and Word documents even fewer. So communication is where the great ideas come out. So this is a great tool to use with your team to get them creatively thinking. This one, what deeper sense of purpose would motivate you to continue to dedicate your precious creative energies to this company's efforts, even if you won the lottery? Now, I know you're thinking, Mark, that's a little aspirational. I mean, if I won the lottery, you know, I'm not working, I'm going fishing, I'm playing golf, I'm doing whatever I want to do, hanging out with my kids, my grandkids, all great stuff. But it's a great challenge to say, how could we build a purpose and challenge your team members with this? I know this may never happen, but what if it did? What would you need to feel? What quality of work would you need to be doing in here so that you'd come back, even if you'd won the lottery? So a fun question to contemplate. And then another one of my favorites is the founder's why. Why was this company founded? And if you look at this picture closely, you'll see the Chick-fil-A sign. So if you're lucky enough, by the way, it's harder to buy a Chick-fil-A restaurant than it is to get into Stanford University, just to give you some perspective. So if you're lucky enough to get a Chick-fil-A restaurant and have that opportunity, then they fly you to Atlanta. That's where the company headquarters is. And they put all the new owners in a bus and they take them out here about an hour outside of town to a little country place. I can't even remember the name of the city, to the Dwarf House. And this is where Chick-fil-A was founded. And it was founded back in the 50s by a guy named Truett Cathy. He passed away 3 years ago. And so oftentimes Dan, his son Dan, accompanies this trip, or some of the key leaders that have been there for a long time that can tell the Truett Cathy stories. And they go out and they sit in this restaurant for a full day. And they talk about Truett's vision and how he saw a restaurant as a place of restoration, and that he felt like we need to serve people that come into our restaurants. This isn't about selling chicken. It's about serving people. And that's what's caused Chick-fil-A to kind of up their standards with, you know, instead of saying, you know, when you say thank you, they say my pleasure. They're looking to take things to the next level. This is why a couple years ago, they introduced these boxes that if you would put your phone in the box, if everybody in the family would put their phone in the box so they're not distracted, close it, eat their dinner or their lunch without distraction, and then go up to the bar afterwards, they give everybody a free ice cream cone. It's little stuff like that they're really looking to honor the family and looking to drive that family interaction, that restoration, that time to restore ourselves over a good meal with good food and good companionship and good communication. And that's where it all was birthed out of. And so that's why they take them back to tell this story of where the company was founded. And by the way, getting on this call, I thought, I wonder how Chick-fil-A is doing. I saw a couple years ago where their sales just so far outpace their competition. And I found a recent story. So listen to this. Chick-fil-A's average revenue per store is $4.2 million. It is the highest of any fast food chain in America, dwarfing both direct competitors, KFC, and then bigger brands like McDonald's. KFC's 1.2 million. So they're almost 4x KFC, who's a direct competitor. And then McDonald's is 2.8 million per store. So they're almost 2x. They're probably about 30% more, 40% more than McDonald's, revenues per store. And is it all because they've got such a great, strong sense of purpose? Chick-fil-A does a lot of things right. But I think it all started with a purpose that was bigger than just making chicken and selling it and making some money. So let's talk about summary and next steps for you. First, I'd really encourage you to discover your organization's core purpose and your personal core purpose. And I use the word discover. You might have gotten a brainstorm when we did the 5 whys exercise. You might have been inspired by some of the stories I told you that gave something to your mind, but I would really encourage you to work on this. Okay, let it settle in. It takes a while to get this right. And it's okay to constantly be tweaking it a little bit and working to really find what connects with you emotionally and what connects with your people emotionally. So start working to discover it, and then discover your core purpose. What are you here to do? What's your role in all this? And then number 2, review it daily. Review it daily. Wake up every morning and look in your journal. I use the Full Focus Planner, and I've got my core purpose laid out right in my Full Focus Planner right here at the top, so that every day when I get up, I can look at that and say, this is what I'm here to do. So how can I do my best at living out that core purpose today? And that'll keep it front and center with you. It'll give you a way to look at your life and the work you do through that sense of purpose. And trust me, it'll help you when you're feeling a little off track. And it'll really help you when you're on a roll. Number 3, tell your story. It doesn't do any good to keep it bottled in. Steve Jobs told everybody, we're changing the world. We're building a bicycle for the minds here, and we're changing the world. The work we're doing is so big. We're changing. Things will never be the same as a result of what we're doing. And he could communicate that with passion. Remember, people hear your words and they feel your passion. And the only way you get good at communicating it is to communicate it. Now, some may use verbal communication like I'm doing here. Some may use the written word. Some may use signage around the office. Some may, work through a champion to help them communicate this. Find a way to get the story out there so that you're communicating it every day. And think about all your stakeholders, your employees, your clients, your vendors, investors, friends, family, whoever. Tell the story. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm about. And then number 4, tell your organization's story of how you're fulfilling your purpose. And I'll go back to Brian Williams, the payroll processing company there, One Source Virtual. And, when we developed his sense of purpose and core values and their vision, Brian did a stump speech for every time they had new employees coming in. He'd take about 2 hours and he'd walk through those components of the company's vision. And he could tell those stories with such passion. And then every month they would get together and somebody from the team would come up and share an example of somebody that's living their purpose, where they've helped some company reach their full potential, where they've helped an employee reach their full potential, where they've helped somebody who worked for one of their companies reach their full potential. It became all around, how do we help others reach their full potential? And it was powerful. It was a way to keep it fresh, keep it real. The Chick-fil-A story is a great example of how to take people back and reassociate on a consistent basis with your story. Some of my clients will, especially when they're just rolling this concept out, they'll have in their weekly huddles, sometimes daily huddles, but in their weekly huddles, they'll have each member of the team update where they've seen somebody living their purpose. and it keeps it real. It keeps the company focused on it, and you're building examples of how that purpose is real so that it becomes real to your people so that they can communicate it with the same level of passion that you have. So I want to thank you for attending. I'm going to put an evaluation in the chat, and I'd love to get your feedback on today's program. And then I also want to open it up for some questions. So you can shoot a question to me in chat, or you can use the question and answer format. But it'd really mean the world to me if you'd give me some feedback in the evaluation. At the end, there's a place where you can just ask ad hoc questions. So if you want me to send you something, or you want some follow-up, or you want to schedule a follow-up phone meeting with me, I'd love an opportunity to do that with you and help you discover your core purpose.